stuff, then you can also leverage on other AI technologies or augmented services to solve the problem end to end.
And what are you doing right now in terms of voice? So are you exploring it? Are you testing it? Are you POCing it? Do you have sessions on it? So what is the agenda like today and tomorrow, or this week or this month, so to speak?
I think that we're doing a number of different things, and we're seeing, especially from companies in English-speaking countries that are on cloud, what they're able to do, right? So that's one thing for the business to buy into the fact that, yes, this is the right thing to do. So that's one thing we do. Another thing we're doing that we are exploring and doing some, I don't like to do POCs, actually.
We can come back and talk about that.
We can come back and talk about that. I actually took part in an article in Harvard Business Review on this particular topic. Kill the POCs, right?
Now we need to take it as the opening. Kill the POCs, a good opening. So then we run with it a little bit more. Yeah. I love that, by the way.
No, you want me to explore on that one, or should we go back to that?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
We come back.
I wrote it up as a future topic.
Yeah. So okay. Cool. So we're also exploring what is the strategic way to go here. We think that we're all going to end up in the cloud eventually, right? Even in Sweden, even the banks, and of course we are already on the cloud in some respect, and some of our competitors are also, and we know that they are moving in there. But meanwhile, we also want to do stuff because we're talking about sensitive data here, right? We're talking about really sensitive data potentially. Customers can talk about, they're sick, or the relatives are sick or something like that. So you need to be careful about this data.
Yeah.
So we're also then exploring ways to potentially, at least in the short term, solve the transcription problem without having to go to cloud necessarily.
And why do you link this type of AI with cloud necessarily? I agree with you, but what's your why do you think they're so connected? What's
basically the ability to scale? Okay,
because if you try to do this on-prem, it's a lot of headache infrastructure-wise, or?
Well, anything that needs to be developed, from scratch, takes longer time than to leverage something that has already been, at least as a platform that you can leverage, or even better if you have SaaS solutions that you can also, you be even faster, and utilizing the components that are sitting on these clouds to put together these things faster. There is not. I think that to some extent maybe the cloud is a bit hyped, because I think there's also a lot of challenges coming with that. So it's not like everything going to be solved with cloud. But it will be, once you are able to handle that, it will be faster, and you will be more efficient, and of course, and maybe most importantly, you will be more flexible.
Yeah,
and you will be more sort of modularized.
But voice, this is one major topic. How can we deal with that? And how is this discussed on executive level? How is this understood as a major opportunity? Has this conversation reached the very top?
I would say so, yes, because it's very related to the topic of customer experience, which is at the top. Sure. That's
clearly top of the agenda.
Yeah.
And clearly we are working, everybody has a relationship with the bank on the phone for sure.
We have 10, 11 million phone calls per year.
So 10, 11 million phone calls, that's the amount of data which we want to understand the insights of. And the core use case is to better understand, but also route.
Yeah.
Okay, so in short, we can summarize that you have a lot of data that comes in the form of voice. And we have basically an unlocked potential there that we haven't really started tapping into in some way, right? But you would like to really start walking that path, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And you want to start faster by doing it given the on-prem paradigm, but you think long-term this is going to be unlocked even more with the cloud paradigm?
I guess you can go three ways maybe. You can go all in on cloud and say, one cloud to rule them all. You know,
that's one way.
One ring to rule them all, right? It's kind of a you know, maybe the architect's wet dream, right? You just go in, you very sort of clean, but that will take time. The other way you can say, well, you know, the business can go out and do whatever they want. They can solve the problem that they have by going to some vendor and solve the problem. And that might be a quicker thing for the particular business unit, but it will
potentially fragment.
Very fragmented, right? And potentially you lose some of the synergies, and it might be more expensive. But then there's some kind of hybrid solution where you may leverage some cloud components and combine that with some of your own components to cater for this sensitivity of data issue, and also to get into understanding what it is about, right?
Yes.
Which is very important.
Yes.
But the problem in general, like, is that we want to jump into these AI solutions because they are so nice on the GUI level, but we don't really understand how they work underneath, and that's dangerous. So I believe this hybrid solution is maybe the best way to go for us, and I think to be able to get some initial value fast and make the learnings, and then in the long term you will
fly.
You will fly, right? Like an airplane.
Like an airplane, yeah. But before we go any further now, let's start with an introduction of Mattias Fras, and we want to hear your story. Who is Mattias, and what do you do, and what has shaped you, so to speak? What sort of anecdotes and career path or experiences do you want to highlight? Who is Mattias?
So Mattias Fras, he is a guy that started out his career in management consulting. So he came back from the US in the 90s after 4 years on a tennis scholarship.
So you're actually, we start like a tennis guy now, right?
Yeah, I was a tennis player.
Yeah.
Still am, but not very much.
Did you have any sort of ambition? You join the tour?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, when I was 16, I was pretty good. Pretty good with.
Well, what is that? Pretty good. What's that all about?
Top
I
10,
was top 50.
Yeah,
20?
in the country, yes.
Uh-huh.
So
I assume you had a scholarship in tennis.
In the US, yes.
In the US.
Yes. So by Swedish standards, by the time I was 18, I was average. but in the US, this was in the late 80s, early 90s, right? Sweden was like
very good
in Davis Cup final every year.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it was like if you were a Swede and you were a tennis player, there was no problem to go to US and get a scholarship. So that's what I did.
You were riding on Edberg and Wilander.
Yeah. I did. I took advantage of that, the Swedish tennis brand. So I spent 4 years there, came back, finished off my studies in Gothenburg School of Economics, and I majored in financial economics. I have a master's in finance, and then started working as a management consulting, because that's what you did. Yeah.
And what type of management consulting?
Well, it was called Anderson Consulting back then. Later turned into Accenture. So it looked very differently then, but I would say it was in the intersection between strategy and process. So operationalized strategies. It's not a pure strategist, not a pure process guy, but in the middle there. So I worked, but mostly on the CFO related agenda. So I did a lot of outsourcing, shared services, lean, the operating model stuff, all that stuff, which is an important part of my story, because the way you were driving change back then, this is then 20 years ago or 15 years ago, was very centered around processes, process optimization, incremental improvements, 10%, 20%, getting the labor arbitrage for moving offshore. Internet was starting to happening, so there was like, you put an E in front of everything, if you remember.
e-commerce, e-business, e-finance,
everything was
e-logistics.
And that was so I worked mainly. I worked always in large corporates, but across all industries. So I worked across, I would say, also the public service sector and across all industries mainly. The typical 3 to 6, maybe sometimes 12, 24 months. And so that was a lot of fun. It was usually also you learned a lot, of course. But after by 2010 or so, I decided at running large scale programs, which is how you become a successful partner with these firms. It was not my thing. So, and I also wanted to have a real job.
Real job, I love that.
Yeah. So I decided I want to have a real job. So and at that time I worked for Nordea in one of their programs from Accenture, and I got lured over by the Swedish life company then. So I started as a CFO for the Swedish life company, which was quite different from my previous experience, but it was, and I stayed there for about 3 to 4 years.
And what was the biggest change from being a consultant to being in the line, so to speak, a CFO?
It was the revelation or the insights of that. There's just a lot of the time to think about how you can do things better is quite limited, right? You have your time to you don't have that much time to analyze these things, but and you also have to manage people.
Manage people, the operations is eating me up, so you don't really have the redundancy to think smart and big and change management or process change or improvement.
Yeah, and as a CFO, of course, you are very bound by
the periodic
reporting. So I knew what I was going to do in 10 months.
You knew what days in the month that where you're not going to speak so much with your wife.
So that was great. But when I started there, it was kind of a growth role. We were going to grow the company, but then there was a bunch of regulations coming in, so it became more and more about compliance and risk management, and that is not really me. So I decided to go back to consulting, you could say, but in the context of Nordea. So
what organization was that was doing that?
So they was in the wealth management part of the bank. So you have retail banking, you have business banking, wholesale banking, and wealth management. And in wealth management, you have asset management, and you have life and pension. So I started in life and pension to drive change. Initiatives.
And what is change?
So, for example, one of the first cases I got to work on was to see what kind of roles we could move down to our nearshore in Poland, right? To get the wage arbitrage, because that's what you did to save cost. So I started to look into that and did the business case and the transition plans and all that stuff. But at that time, this was maybe around 2015. There was this thing called robotics that started to emerge. RPA. Where you could
be careful now, Anders always get rashes when we say RPA.
Yeah. Well,
I want to hear you talk about this later.
I think that we share the same view on it. But at this time, it was like, so you can have this script move around multiple systems just as a human, and you can download a license, and all of a sudden you have the equivalent of 10 FTEs at the cost of less than half an FTE. So if you and the scope of the work that a robot can do is almost 100% overlapping with the kind of stuff that you would move to a nearshore center.
Yeah,
rule based, the well documented, the stable,
I remember this conversation in when I was in Vattenfall, and it was a little bit like we were down in the sort of offshore, nearshore BPO discussion. We have gone too far, and I'm like, do you want to really offshore to a person when you can offshore to a robot? Not solving the underlying problem, but solving the same problem as labor arbitrage.
So what we realized then was that, because what I did was I said that, why should we move any people anywhere? Because it takes time, it's expensive, when we can do this instead. So that was when I was then. And then we went around to the different countries and we asked the CEOs, what, if you had these robots, what kind of problems would you like to solve? And what we realized then was that you can, regardless of what your key KPIs are, if it's cost, compliance, transformation, or if it's speed, you can use this tool to accomplish that to some extent, which was very interesting, right? Because in Denmark, they were in the middle of an IT transformation. They built these modules, but they were not integrated and it took longer time than expected. So then we could use the robots temporarily to integrate those modules, right? Or you can actually release a customer end user app and build the backward integration with these robots while you were developing.
So essentially, it's such a massive landscape, and systems need to talk to each other, and it's actually quite a lot of manual stuff in between systems in a large enterprise. Is that one of the key things? Or
especially if you're in this replatforming that they were in, right? So they basically they wanted to use robots to get some of these gains earlier
than what the whole platform
waiting for the end solution. Yeah. So that was one case, and then in Sweden, in some other country, there was like they need to take down some people in the customer call center and so on. So that's.
So you had some very clear drivers.
Yes, very clear drivers, and the revelation I think for me was then that here is a technology that can make us move much faster, and it's a multi-purpose technology. It can be applied anywhere in the organization, right? Which was interesting because it always was about each function fixing their own problems with a sort of a proprietary solution. So that was the first time I really got intrigued by that, because all the stuff that I've been doing up until then came into a new light, and how you can use new technology.
Yeah. And when was this roughly?
15, 16.
15, 16. And what happens, or what was the progression after that within the company, so to speak?
So then the progression was that we scaled this capability up, and we applied it to we found these quick wins, and that took quite a while, because. And that's back to the way of thinking about these new tools, right? What is a robot? How do you define a robot?
How do you define a robot, by the way?
I mean, what kind of, when you recruit someone and you give that person access rights, you give them a PC and you give that person like access to systems. Does a robot have the same profile? So you can actually should you be able to give the same access rights to a robot? Because then it can do exactly the same thing as I can do. So when we talked about the definition of robot, it would define it as, what kind of access profile should it have?
But you're still speaking about software robots, which is, in my view, a bit of a confliction in terms, or I mean, in robot in some way, at least according to some people, is actually a physical manifestation of something. But there are certainly a lot of people that use robot in terms of software bots. But
and this is clearly software robots, of course.
This is software automation.
Yeah, and to be a little bit more, maybe some of our listeners is not really using this a lot. So how does a software robot work? What is the essential premise? How does it work in principle?
The essential premise is, if you think about, I'm old enough to have worked a lot with macros in the 90s.
Excel macros.
Yeah. So you can,
macros. We still use it. They're still useful.
I think a lot of people still use that, right?
I think so too.
So you use, and what you can do there, you have the spreadsheet and you can press record and you can move stuff across different spreadsheets, and you stop and then it would do that thing.
Well, you could definitely use technology for this. I wonder what is the foundation for it, if it's the chatbot is the foundation or if it's something else. Because let
me be a bit of a negative person here, and we get so many requests also for building chatbots in this way and that way, and usually the user experience is really poor because they replace humans, and people, and especially customers that call in, if you do used for customer service, they want to speak to humans, and they have an experience when speaking to a computer that is very poor. But then there are, if you look at research, a number of very interesting things. I think Google and Facebook have this kind of Nina, and they have this blender systems, and they can really generate completely novel kind of answers, but it's far away from what the commercial systems today can do. I would argue, and I would love to hear your story about this, one of the first chatbots was this ELISA system. I think it back in 1960s or something. And it was this system for psychological therapists, basically. And they used this kind of type of technique. I think it's called like Rogerian type of therapist technique, where you basically, if you ask me a question, I just rephrase it and ask the question back to you, and you have to answer your own question. So it's very, of course, rule-based, very, very simplistic, doesn't understand anything about the meaning, but it actually worked back in 1960s in having some kind of conversation, even though it was no intelligence at all, more or less, in that system. And I would argue that the chatbots of today, even if you have intent and entities and action that you can try to rule-based program, are not that different from ELISA back in 1964. Would you agree?
Yeah, I don't know ELISA, so I can't really benchmark. So I mean, in terms of word error rate or whatever, the chatbots now are quite good. I mean, but I don't know what the word error rate of ELISA was.
No, but your point here is a little bit it's
still very much a template-based kind of system. So you have slot filling. Basically, you have a set of questions. They can potentially fill in some words depending on some facts that they can input into
and
it.
What's wrong with that?
It's very rule-based, and it's not intelligent, and it doesn't do anything close to what a human would do.
And what is the next step, or what could be done differently?
I mean, there are some really cool, recent advances like Nina and like Blender and from Google and Facebook, and these type of systems really, you can ask them more or less anything, and they don't fill in a template.
And what's the difference in how they operate or work? I
mean, it's a super huge AI model with billions of parameters in it, and it uses the latest type of NLP techniques to generate text and then do a. But
the point is, of course, for a bank, it still needs to have a context and a purpose, right? I mean, like it has to be answering a question which is relevant to solve the problem, the question.
So they couldn't take a model like this and train it for the type of questions that you would like to have answered, because it's a really advanced technology and it requires a lot of data that you need to have to let it actually answer the questions properly that you want it to answer. So you still have to, and I'm guessing now, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but you still have to resort to the traditional rule-based intent type of dialogue systems we have. But please let me know if I'm wrong.
No, I wouldn't say that they are rule-based anymore. I would say that they are quite intelligent, but there are. I can't answer to the underlying technology, to be honest. But the way we do it now is that we basically feed a bunch of 25,000 chats in Swedish, chat logs in Swedish, and the system builds the hierarchy, maybe 1,000 intents.
Yes.
And then the AI trainer, which is a new job, right? The AI trainer goes in and adjusts those flows, make sure that it's a pleasant conversation, and make sure that it covers these 1,000 or whatever 2,000 intents, covers a majority of what you would expect customers to call about. And then you just see what and learn from how the interactions go with the customers.
And can it self-learn over time?
Yeah, it self-learns all the time. But it's always we don't want to make the mistake of Microsoft's Twitter robot a few years ago, right?
Exactly.
But so there's also always a human in the loop. But the robot can suggest, this question I will not been able to ask these questions. But this has been the conversation flow. I suggest you create something here. But then there's always a human that sort of adds
but the interesting topic here is a little bit like the underlying process of managing this system and how you're having an AI trainer. That tells us something that the technology has evolved, how you work with this compared to the rule-based approach 5-6 years ago. Or
no, but it's not so much about the technology. I think the technology was decent 5-6 years ago as well. It's not the technology, it's about how we apply it. That's the problem. So it's like, how do you, like you said, you need to sort of, rather than trying to replace the human chat with a chatbot.
What's the use case where this?
I mean, how can you reimagine how you interact with your customers? It's more like a strategic question, and it is like, it is, what kind of cognitive, whatever microservices can you support here to make a great customer experience, and to use the data that you get from the interactions with the customers to let that steer the roadmap. So customers usually want to solve a problem. That's always what it comes down to. When they call us or when they chat with us, they want to solve a problem. So that's what we need to focus on. And if we can do that, then we will be able to drive traffic to this robot.
But let's start with this as the main topic after we have concluded the
introduction.
Where you are today.
So we went into chatbots and we've had a long journey there.
But let's really go here first. How problem solving, and because keep that thought. This has changed now. The ecosystem, thinking of all what we can do, strategically rethink. That's the first line of topic we're going to have when you finish.
So I'll speed up my introduction. so virtual agents, and then I joined the group function that we call Group Data Management Office, which basically is where we set the standards for governance and management of data, and also where we have the AI machine learning capabilities, for example. So since 3-4 years ago, I've been working also both strategically with AI machine learning on like how do we adopt to this new technology, how do we organize, how do we govern, what problems do we solve, but also then concretely working with a portfolio of use cases related to machine learning.
And you've been on this level now, working with this. What was your role title today, Mattias?
My role title is something like AI strategy and acceleration was the one I have on LinkedIn still. It used to be my official role title. Now it's more like AI strategy and data. What am I called? AI strategy and data lead.
Data lead.
Yeah.
Has your role expanded with the data as well, or was it always there?
My mind has expanded, at least.
Your headache has expanded.
No, but it's as you know, the AI is still applying machine learning across the group is still what we want to leverage, but it's of course very much related to making sure the data is consumable and for these models to get to work.
We have so much to talk about.
Yes, could we just that gave a good background about your journey, so to speak, but I think a lot of people would be interested to see how does actually Nordea organize around innovation and AI in some way. If you could just speak a bit about, how does your group work? Do you have a team that works with just AI specifically? Is it embedded more into different other departments that you have in Nordea? Or how do you make AI innovation and strategy and acceleration, which I think your title is, work in Nordea?
Yeah, and let's start that as the new first theme then. So this is a theme, like how do we organize AI concretely? How does it work in the group?
So it's evolving, right? It has been evolving. So now we're entering a new phase. where we are establishing this AI hub and spoke model. So basically, we have a hub, and we have an AI strategy, which is very much a business-led strategy. So we wanna basically clear the runway for business to be able to leverage these new tools when they're trying to accomplish their strategies. So the enablement is one part. Then the execution is another part, where we actually do projects in the hub or in the group data management office. The business come and say, hey, we want a churn model. We want you to develop it for us. Okay, so we do that. Or they say, we want 3, black belt data scientists to work on this NLP thing. Can we take them? And then they take them and they sit in a local execution unit and develop the solution.
So typically, has that something to do with their maturity, if they want you to do it for them, or if they want to
maturity is a big thing.
Embed them, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you have the choice of embedding people from you in their team, or taking them in and taking the task, the use case into the hub.
Or there's also like a hybrid solution where they say, hey, we want to build this with you guys. Can we co-create? So they're basically the 3 ways that we can implement on the execution part.
Yeah.
So then we have the enabling part, which is about clearing the runway, the infrastructure, tooling, and all that stuff. Then we have the a methodology also. Then we have the third thing, which is about advising and training, basically. So
even AI literacy, or for business, or for experts, or both.
I would say it's depending on the maturity of the organization, and if there's like a vendor coming in, these Peltarian guys or whatever, right? And they are really getting the business excited, and then they might the business call us and say, hey guys, we have this interesting vendor. Can you come and join us and look under the hood and see, if this can solve our problem? So that's kind of an advice, or it could be like questionnaires from the FSA, or it could be like media or whatever, right? Where we have some knowledge that we will use. And then the last one is really, the fourth one is really around engagement, or engaging people, engaging talent, internal talent, and also trying to be attractive for external talent. So those are the 4 key, pillars of this AI hub thinking.
Can you just repeat them? You had enabling, you had
enabling,
advising.
executing, advising, and engaging.
Cool.
But the way that is a quite new way of approaching this hub and spoke is something that we are actually now setting up. But
where did you come from? What was it? This is what you're trying to shape right now, or you're on the journey of shaping that.
Yeah.
What did that evolve from? So there's something you learned, and you did it in some way, and then you learned, and now you're shaping a little bit different. So where are you coming from, and why did you change, or how did you evolve into this direction? I think this is a good learning point around.
Yeah, I think that it evolved from one perspective around the need of strategy, governance, and methodology.
That was the initial.
That's one push.
Yeah.
So that needs to sit somewhere. Because you could say, you go just as with we talked about this initial voice case where you can have the business go do whatever they want, right? But so there's a need for this common stuff. That was one reason, and the other reason is just the other revelation that it's this AI thing is such a team sport. You cannot drive this from a central unit.
No.
You can also not drive it from some pockets out in the business. No. You need to connect things. So that's why this hub and spoke model is very useful. And you want to concentrate a few more black belts centrally that can support the rest. But you also want to have data scientists and of course machine engineers and data engineers and everything out in the company as well, or out in the organization as well. So and we were working out how this balance should be, what should be in the spoke, what should be in the hub, and that is maturity thing. But that's kind of how it came to where we are now. But I would say that we're still also very there's stuff going on in different places, and also where do you draw the line between BI, and then you have analytics, advanced analytics, and then you have AI. It's not so easy, right? So in Group Data Management Office, we have all of that stuff.
And what about data ops, ML ops, data science, advanced analytics? So to be clear now, what does this function report into? Or where do you, you're on the business side, or are you part of the IT organization? No, you're not part of the IT organization, I believe.
So in Group Data Management Office, we have both business and IT. Data sciences.
Okay, so Group Data Management has both.
Yeah.
And is this the same as this total IT supply in Nordea, or do you have another?
So we have Group IT as well. So
you have Group IT.
Then we have data systems, as we call them. That sits under GDMO, Group Data Management Office. So there we have both IT and business. So data science is business, machine learning engineers is IT. So we have them all in one unit.
And are they then focusing on a certain type of IT or certain type of systems? If I take the core banking systems, where do they belong? Is that some Group IT, or as an example? So you have I am assuming now you have in some ways your own data and architectural landscape to deal with data pipelines, advanced analytics, BI, and stuff like that. That's my assumption.
Yeah. Then again, in Group IT, they also do machine learning, and so it's not.
It's a huge corporation.
Yeah.
Right?
So we're kind of coming together and finding the way, and also in the business there are also great people that that do machine learning. So and I think that one thing that I've picked up over the last year is that they are all very interested in joining some kind of community or tribe where they can grow.
Yeah.
So this thing about centralization and decentralization is not. That's not the game anymore. It's about some other things.
It's something else.
Yeah.
But another way to look at this, very interesting, I think, is to understand if you have this technology or data and AI, and how does it relate to the export, to the chief C-suite, so to speak. So so how far up and how who in the C-suite is sort of representing you, or how does it connect to the absolute executive board?
So we have these business lines. You have personal banking, you have business banking, and you have large corporate institutions, and then you have asset management, and you have group business support.
Yeah.
So group business support, that's where we sit.
Okay, so then basically group VP, group business support, and then GDMO reports into this.
Yeah.
Okay, it's interesting, and because it also highlights another example. Do you work on this? Like, is this part of strategy and growth, or is it part of cost? Like sometimes Group IT's sense is in the costs, is a cost, and then this is maybe something else. So that's why exploring these topics is quite important, I think, to understand in the context of whatever company you're in. Are you in the right spot?
Of course. No, I think back to this. We are really trying to, as I said, we're trying to be more focused now, but also trying to be very business led. That's what the strategy is saying. So we're trying to follow the money, follow the business, and be relevant to them and solve problems for them.
Yeah.
But it's, of course, in the large corporate, it's difficult, right? Because you have a history, and you have funding models that are budgeting models that might not be perfectly suitable with going into the new, so to speak.
There's so many agendas to balance.
Yeah.
So it's not a really simple answer in these cases, I guess.
No.
Any other organizational topics that is, if you want to highlight something that is really like a do's and don'ts, or really this is a tip from the coach, organizational wise, what you figured out that you're doing in your team.
It's one of my favorite topics, but I will not sort of drain that subject more than saying. I think it's to me it's been really interesting to think about how you organize. So in terms of how do you when I went to Silicon Valley back in 18. It was a really great trip for me because I just met all these great people, and they all talk about what is your 10x and what is your problem that you're solving, and they had just different, wording of things. But one thing that they talk about, and I've been thinking a lot about, is like this edge innovation versus core innovation. So core innovation is that you're trying to change from within. You're trying to change the mothership from within. Whereas edge innovation is say, hey, we set up this X company here, and we're trying to disrupt the mothership. And we do things here, and so those are two schools, right? So what is the right balance?
I mean, we've spoken about this a bit before, and I think another way to phrase that is saying bottom-up versus top-down innovation. So you can say bottom-up in terms of these are the processes we have today. Let's see how we can improve them in some way. Do some incremental improvement in terms of efficiency or quality in some way. And then you can think more top way, saying, can we completely change, the way we actually do things, more edged style? And how do you think you should balance those? Do you think you should have both? Do you think one of them should be given more focus than they have, or what's the proper way to do that?
One of the conclusions I made is it's very tied to the company culture. It needs to fit the company culture. So if you, and I've seen in other companies where they've tried this X thing, and it's
if the company culture in the core is too strong, you do something cool in edge, and then you try to flip it back in, and the core eats it up alive.
Yeah, or it doesn't. You throw it over the fence, and it's like, what are we going to do with this? We didn't build this.
Not invented here.
So I think it's you might need to try some different. The way I've been doing things, because nobody really asked me to do this robotics thing or this virtual. I just believed in it, so I just found someone.
But you found champions in the core.
I found someone that I could get through the tipping point, and then we did it. And then you prove the value, and then more and more people see it. So I think it's very much depending on the company culture. Some companies you might have someone strong leader as saying, we're gonna.
But even if you do that, I mean, even if you take like a forward-thinking company like Spotify, it was super hard to do edge type of innovation. It was super hard to do long-term thinking, saying this is something we potentially will gain some money for in 2 years. And to get that across and actually spend money and invest in that was really hard. And for companies like banks, I'm not sure, but it can be even harder. I'm not sure. Or what do you think?
No, I think it comes a little bit back to one thing that's maybe also on the top of the hype cycle now, but this purpose-driven way of thinking now, that many companies, they have these purposes now. Apple talked about this now, right? They're going from having this 30-day time horizon to be more purpose-driven. That helps, I think. But you're right. It's difficult, maybe especially for some companies that are on the stock exchange to be able to do these more long-term things. But
But what is your personal view on edge versus core innovation? You said it has a lot to do with culture, right? So what fits in your culture, you need to sort of play with that. So when is it more suitable? What type of culture is it more suitable to bank on the go from within, disrupt from within? And when is it necessary to go the other way? Do you have any recipe or thinking around that? Rules of thumb? Have you if you take your own experiences?
I think most likely the edge is easier to get started with and get some excitement with, and you can get stuff maybe into production. But to scale it up, I think it's very difficult. I still haven't seen
it either.
Anyone that has succeeded.
So let me be.
So I think it's better to say that if you so it's probably better to be not closer to the core, not in the core, but closer to the core, but within the core have some kind of mandate, some kind of discretionary mandate, and a set of KPIs that are a little bit different from the KPIs of business as usual. And so then you can be closer to the core while being able to actually put some stuff into production, not do POCs, but do MVPs, right?
But to do evolutionary MVPs, I like this concept a lot. We talk about this a lot. But what you are saying is that within the core and within the mandates and the P&Ls and the real sort of core bosses agenda, find the radical teams to do stuff, but they're still connected within. So it's not like in a large corporation that it's so easy to put something on a different agenda. We build this, and all of a sudden you're going to drop that in someone else's P&L. That's hard, in my opinion. And the guys who owns that P&A and they have their problems, how they want to maximize their balance sheet. So is that what you're saying? So you need to still understand the core mechanisms and steering and KPIs of the core, and then you need to play well together with that in some sense. Or
yeah, I think so. I mean, in general.
In general, I see it the same.
Yeah.
And if you need to go, I mean, like I can argue that okay, we are totally stuck. Let's maybe even go in some types of organizations where for some reason it cannot change. I mean, like we're talking about the Kodak moment, right? An example, right? So if you need to go edge, maybe the whole idea is to spin up the future, and so you knoppar av, like you let that go, and then you basically scale from there, and it starts cannibalizing. What do you think about that edge strategy? Not edge to go back in, but edge to see where it can take us, and it maybe can fly on its own. It's a new unicorn.
That could probably work in some companies where you have that culture and you give people incentives to get there. I think it's completely different incentives that you need to get people. But I'm more in favor of the emerging development model or whatever, that you're opening up the system and you are going from ecosystem to ecosystem, right? So you kind of opening up to working with partners that have made, because all the problems that we are facing, they've already been solved by someone else, right? There's not like, we don't have that complex. We're not planning to send people to Mars, some kind of faraway planet, but our problems are quite difficult, but that they are solvable, and it's the things we want to do has been solved. So it's about finding those partners that have the solutions and team up with them, rather than to try to have some kind of internal unit that is going to do that for us. That internal unit could be like an accelerator and do this, find these guys.
And what do you mean with partner? From a banking perspective, or from a technology perspective, or any kind of?
I mean, say you have one big thing for a bank is credit management, credit scoring. So why don't you doing credit scoring can be done fast if you have the data. There are companies that are doing this already, and if you can team up with them and use their, I mean, it's basically an API, right? You could say. So if you can, or take KYC.
Know your customer.
Yeah, know your customer.
AML is another topic like this.
Yeah, so there are already utilities that do these things. So instead of trying to figure out how to solve that, maybe try to use their utility, so and put it in your,
because you're essentially, you start talking about emerging ecosystem thinking in different ways, services and data, and using different services from different partners in order to create value, not really trying to do everything yourself.
Yeah, I think that's what the fintech industry and the fintech companies have showed us, is that they can solve problems in a beautiful way, but they often only solve a very narrow problem, right? There was a time, like maybe 2-3 years ago, or 4 years ago, when everybody was saying, the fintech's going to take over the world and the banks are going to disappear.
But let us now move into a new theme, because we have now explored edge innovation and core innovation. And now let's continue on this but the segue is into financial industry innovation. So we explore different ways how you can innovate, and now we're ending up more concretely in what is happening in the finance industry. So we can explore fintech, what we talk about that. I think this is extremely interesting, because edge and core is one perspective on this, and now let's move into other perspective that is, as you see, relevant for the finance sector. So so please continue. You were going into fintech and what have they done well, and what are they not succeeding with, and so forth. So just continue where you were, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great companies, fintech companies, that are solving these narrow problems, and the problem for them is they don't have infrastructure. They don't want to deal with compliance. But that's what we are good at, and we have infrastructure. We have a lot of foundation. We also have a lot of customers, by the way. So I think we're now moving into more like collaboration. So how can banks and fintechs collaborate?
So you're saying, like, what are we really good at, and what is really our fit here? And for some stuff that we try to do with some of the fintech companies is almost, it's a stretch for us to do it, but for them it's simple. But vice versa, for them to do some of the stuff that the big bank can do is a stretch for them. So how can we now partner up? More or less, right?
Yeah. So I think that's, if you look into when I think about how to prepare for the future for a large bank, I think it has a lot to do with that. So how you can create this or apply this modular thinking, and where should we differentiate, and what should we then try to build ourselves or maintain ourselves, and what kind of stuff should we just take from the outside and infuse in the bank.
So from a strategic point of view, and what you're saying now is making total sense. But but how do you do that in a large, system landscape where that sort of collaboration will happen on a data and AI level, right? Or how do you? So I think the logic is clearly there, but there are some hurdles. I guess.
I was hoping you could tell me how we can do that.
I can do that, but
but I think that's also up to that. There are different ways. Of course, the cloud providers they want to, Google will say, we have this contact center AI platform. You can just take on your contact center and just put it on our platform, and it's a platform as a service, and you can build it there.
But I don't really think this is a tech problem at all. I think it's a practice and how you apply tech in order to we have built proprietary stuff that is optimized for our silo or our bank or even a part of the bank, and now we need to flip it that we will need to build data products, data services, microservices, whatever you want to call it, internally in the bank, but that is actually consumable and servable to outside players, API based, and then you have the other area. Someone else has a microservice, and we can plug that into what we are doing. So for me, this is a practice, strategic shift in architecture rather than it's a tech story.
Yeah,
it's a practice story.
It's a practice story, and it brings in like a new prerequisite for the top management in terms of stacking strategically.
Yes.
How should we? What should we?
What should we do, and what should we not do, and let someone else do?
And not have that. So that those are now becoming very strategic decisions to make for a bank that may have used to be decisions taken on a much lower level.
Yeah. And do you think the fintech as such, that phenomenon has put the light on this? Is this the driver to start thinking about ecosystem, that it becomes clear that, hey, oh my God, they claim they can set up a new bank in 20 minutes, plug and play. Is this a driver of you to start thinking about that, or is it something else?
No, I think the fintechs has shown us what a great customer experience can look like.
Yeah.
and that is pushing us. And it's also now then that we would like to cooperate with some of them rather than to say that we are competition. We cooperate. So I think they are pushing the boundaries for larger corporates to see what's the possible, what kind of great frictionless customer experience look like.
But let me be a bit perhaps aggressive here then, and me coming from other tech companies as well, and seeing what we can do with data and AI, like recommender systems or whatnot. Why can't you in Nordea simply build a recommender systems for saying, you as a person seem to have invested in these type of stocks or funds and whatnot. Here are some similar ones and recommendations for that. Why can't we see for me, it would be like an obvious thing to do. Why hasn't that happened?
I'm not sure. I think in part it is related to the uncertainty a little bit on what you can do with data and can't do with data, and what you need consent for and what you don't need consent for. What kind of governance you need to put on top of your data to be able to do these things. So there's some data maturity there, I think, is one reason.
Is the regulation problem, you think? I mean, still, I think most companies, even companies that do work directly with customer data, have really strong, especially with GDPR in place and what we will have in coming years. It's still very much a consent-based type of regulation. I know the banking sector, of course, have even more extreme regulation in place. Do you think that's the main reason, that it's a fear of regulation?
No, I think that may be one of the reasons. I think it's to some extent, if you want to do something with data in a bank and you're a little bit uncertain, the easy answer is always no.
Yeah.
But that is changing. So I wouldn't say maybe that's the main reason anymore. And we are doing some of the stuff that we have in production is related to, next best product and segmentation, micro segmentation, and so that we are in our marketing automation space. We're doing that, nudging customers. If we want to do a campaign, we run it through machine learning models to identify target groups and so on. So I think it will come, but then also should you develop that in-house, or should you just bring it in?
That's another question, and I think that's an interesting topic in itself, but it's really interesting to me, and especially if you think about the well-established banks like Nordea, and you compare it to if we can say like Avanza or Klarna or whatever kind of these kind of new type of banks that do pop up all the time they are starting to come up with a large number of new kind of high-tech solutions. How do you cope with that type of new competition in some way? Do you see that you want to go that way yourself, or is it more to integrate and collaborate with them, or how do you find that type of new competition? Okay.
I think it's on one hand it's a little bit difficult because some of these new companies are not actually advising, they're guiding. And the regulation on advising is completely different from advising.
Guiding and advising is different.
Yeah, if you have advising, you have MiFID II, you have,
MiFID,
let's not go into the regulation, but basically there's different regulation and the different sort of ways you can charge for these things and so on. So that is, I think, one part of it.
But I would like that, because you're leading us into the next theme here, Anders, with these questions, because I was really interested to explore how we see, what does it take from a structural capital point of view to work with data and AI in a bank successfully, and what is the human capital side of things. And I think to some degree, it's working in large enterprises myself is like it's such a convoluted topic. Why can't we do AI, right? Well, it's about the data, it's about the So maybe we can structure the question in such a way. So what are the structural capital topics you think is super important for the bank to be good at to succeed with AI? And then what are the human capital sides? And if we do that, I think it answers back to what we can do faster and stuff like that. So maybe structural capital topic on data and AI. How do you
and when you
that?
say what do you mean by structural?
I mean, like to simplify, structural capital for me is the technology and processes side. Human capital is the people, the culture, the software sides. The hard versus the soft. And some things in the gray area. But let's talk about technology, system, architecture, processes. What do you need to sort of, if you want to get started and what are the things that sort of is blocking, but also critical, the way we look at it, learnings.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of structured capital, I think that we have most of the stuff that we need. Some people say, we wish we were in the cloud, we would be more flexible but I'm not sure. That's probably the case, but I think that we have well enough structured capital to do a lot of things. And
technology, I would agree. Do you have the operating model and processes for DevOps and data ops and machine learning ops and stuff like that? Because that's another dimension of, when infrastructure and code, process and technology is almost blurs. So that's what I've seen. We have a shitload of technology, but the way we are setting it up or using it or working together is shit.
Yeah, I think if you're related to the size of the company,
yes.
maybe it's not utilized, in the best way. But also, I think it requires quite a bit to run a bank, as it is, and to cope with the new regulations. So I'm not. So I think that we have most of the components. We need to adjust it and align it to be able to move faster. And to be able to meet up with a new competition, while at the same time being safe and compliant. So
is that a change in the way we operate? Innovation, maybe, I don't know. I mean, like the bank, we know how to operate, but how to bring innovation in or industrialize, or what are you talking about? What is the tweaking we need to do?
Yeah, I think it's back to a little bit this stacking thing, like be a bit more aware of what components you need to, or actually how you can be more flexible and respond to whatever the future will look like. I think that is the change in the whole industry now. It used to be more, 10 years ago, you used to be more certain about what banking looks like now, and you can draw a line. And it will be a little bit more, but it will be somewhere around here. Now it's more like nobody has an idea what banking will look like in 10 years. So how do you prepare for that? And it's like that changes the way in terms of you can no longer build your systems and your structure capture in a linear format. You need to decouple things and then be able to bring in new things and be faster in this way of thinking. I think that's where everybody is struggling now. So,
but maybe that's me. The way I interpret what you say now is that we've been able to set up processes. Traditional. This is as is. This is to be. This is the gap analysis, and then we define a new process, and we build a new system, and then we're done. And now we're not ever again going to be done ever again. It's a continuous, so the processes that maybe be viewed as static, and we have organized them from a static point of view, they need to continuously drip feed and evolve. New data, new technologies, new algorithms are infused or changing the way we can do things. For me, this is a different way of looking at process. You go away from line and project to DevOps, business ops. I think this is quite different in operating innovation into the core and not having projects. This is my view.
I agree, but so there's something here about building these modular platforms and be very service oriented, microservice oriented, of course, and API powered. So you can be flexible and adapt to whatever the future of banking will look like. And I guess some banks might be pure backend providers because they're very good and efficient at that, and the margins will not be great, but that's a business to be in. Some banks will be purely customer facing niche players, and some will still be full service provider, and I think that's where Nordea wants to be. But that then requires you to be able to manage both the sort of the back core of it, but then also this modular thinking in terms of the customer facing part. So I think that's on a high level how you can think about it.
Yeah. And moving over to the human capital side then, because what we are talking about then is in one way the architecture and the way we drive projects is different.
Yeah.
How is it different for the people or the teams? Or how, you said it's a team play, right?
I think this is where the big challenge is for countries and companies and everyone, and also the most difficult thing, obviously, because we need to be much more problem solvers than process followers. So this is when when I think about how you can see it as, I think that we are all now competing on the rate of learning almost. Whoever has the highest rate of learning will be most likely be successful in 10 years compared to the others. So how do you transform an organization to be in that mode? Just as the machine learning models constantly learn from data, the people also will need to learn from data.
So how do you design a learning organization by design? How do you don't make that into chance, but strategically build a learning organization? And we're talking individual level, team level, enterprise level, and ultimately you're back to Sweden and society, right? This is interesting stuff. Have you thought about this?
Yeah, I've thought about this. It's one of my favorite topics.
So so we're moving into human capital, and we are immediately moving into learning organization as a core topic.
Yeah, but before that, I would like to put a mix here a bit, just to break the flow a bit. You started with the future of banking. And one of the things that we want to portray with this podcast is actually show some kind of a vision that we're going to fail of how the future will look like in 2030 by looking at specific industry and how in a utopian, dystopian type of way they should be actually looking like. So for example, this is a question for all of you. So how the banking will look like in 2030? You started a bit, but I would like to hear your thoughts as well, because it's a very interesting topic, right?
Okay, so let's finish the innovation and where this is going. But I want to go back to human capital and learning, because this is goosebump material.
But there has been a lot of changes in regulation for banking, and there was a new law, right, in 2018 about betaltjänster, so to speak, right, and an EU directive that also opened up
the PSD2,
yeah, exactly. That changed a bit about what companies can do with information from banks, and then we have all these kind of newcomers coming in, and perhaps one day Amazon will launch something in Sweden that may not only be a retailer but also a bank in some way. Who knows? Or Tesla may do the same. They are planning to open insurance companies,
Apple Pay,
and all these kind of tech companies will come into Sweden as well. And what's your thinking about that? What will happen in 10 years? What will happen in 2030? How will the banking industry look like at that point?
But this is also a question for you, because I think that then it's a good mix here.
But
he's an expert on it, so he should answer.
But he has already answered it. It's an ecosystem, and we can elaborate on that from hell. But I think that's the underlying story that I would say talk about. But let's go. Where is banking in 10 years?
I think, as I said, I don't think anyone knows.
Touché.
But I think that you said if Amazon or Tesla or everyone starts, retail banking, the thing I think which is interesting there is that they're not in it for the money, right? They're in it for the data. So they might offer it for free. So what happens then to the
incumbents?
Yeah, or to the model, right? It's not so easy to say.
But how do you mean they're not in it for the money? And what's the value?
I mean,
of
not
data?
in it for the money. I was completely wrong. But I mean, they're not interested.
They monetize in different ways.
Products.
They're monetizing in a different way.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
And what are they monetizing? If
they're using their data, right? For
they can bundle in different ways.
Yeah. But I don't know. I was maybe a few years back. I was more sort of certain that might happen, but I'm not so sure anymore. I mean, banking is, building software is easy these days, but building a full service bank is not so easy.
I don't think so easy. I mean,
building a car.
Let him answer.
Sorry.
But so there is banks. They rely, of course, we rely a lot on our trust, right? So I think in general, people have a higher trust in banks and how we handle their data than perhaps from Facebook or Google. So that also means that we are a bit more careful, and that might be something that means something also in the future, and something that I think that the new tech companies will find ways to collaborate with us as bank in different ways. But of course you would like to pay your bill in your Tesla if you can, because you have this voice. You have Alexa there, so you just pay your voice via whether they have their own banking license and they operate that, or whether it is just an interface. That could depend on many things, like blockchain, for example.
Okay, so you touched upon an interesting topic here, and I was waiting a bit for that. But some companies like Facebook that you mentioned also proposed a new cryptocurrency some years ago, Libra or something it was called, right? And I don't think it really played out well. And they tried to get the big banks on board, and MasterCard and Visa and whatnot. But in that case, it didn't work out that well, as far as I know. Or do you know anything?
No, I heard it. That's my perception as well.
Yeah. But still, we can see it's starting to move in that direction in some way. The big tech giants that are the most valuable companies in the world today are moving into the finance sector in different ways. If it means currency, if it means banking, or insurance, who knows? Do you think that's inevitable in some way, or do you still think that the big, well-established banks will survive in 10 years?
Yeah, I don't know. You're really putting me on the spot here.
I know. How fun would it be if it were easy questions?
Yeah, but it's difficult to foresee. I think that these marketplaces or these systems where money and will be moving around will be probably increasingly complex, where you have bots interacting with backend providers, interacting with brokers, interacting with. So I think that it's difficult. But
it could also be that the tech giants have an extremely well functioning customer service support. They have an extremely well functioning system that can use data and AI to a level that no one else can do. To simply provide a service, if it is for social networks or for a search engine or whatnot. It still is something that is very far away from what anyone else can do. And if they were to use the same techniques for insurance, banking, currency, wouldn't that be a bit scary? I think so, actually.
Yeah. I mean, you could look at what's happening in China, I guess, and with WeChat and some of these, they are just taking over everything.
Yeah, right.
But they can do that because they don't really care so much about data integrity, and they don't have it regulate. They regulate if they have to, if it's very serious.
And the government probably controls everything anyway.
So I think that there's a large difference between China and Europe and the US in that sense, right? China is where all the implementation is done. Nobody will ever catch up, right? The US is still where the innovation comes from. The most advanced papers come from there. It's still kind of.
Would you still think that happens though? I mean, I think.
Well, at least that's what Kai-Fu Lee said, so I trust him on that one.
I think just recently, number of papers from China has been far superior US for a long time, but now I think just recently, in the last couple of months, China also surpassed US in number of citations for scientific papers in AI.
But the breakthrough papers, what he was saying, the breakthrough things.
So far,
but I'm not the expert here.
Yeah.
I'm on thin ice. But Europe is still kind of a regulatory superpower.
Yeah.
So
in
that
good and bad ways, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So in terms of data integrity, that's probably a good thing. If you listen to Apple, right? They refer to GDPR. It's not a GDPR can be. There's some good things with it and some bad things with it. But I think they're looking to Europe to say, there's something there with this data integrity that's a good thing. And I have chosen to have the same viewpoint. Maybe moving fast and breaking things, we will suffer some consequences. But so it's back to also those kind of things when you say, the big tech companies, they have the tech, but is it really what we want? Yeah. Is it really what we want? And as long as they are in this advertising hole, or some of them at least. Not so sure.
So one spin on this, I've been listening a little bit on other podcasts to Alexander Bard as an interesting philosopher, and to really stretch our things. And you can think whatever you want to him, but he has it's I find it quite entertaining and very smart. I mean, and one of the key things that will be a major currency, according to many thinkers, is trust. I mean, when the greed has gone too far, when everything has gone too far, when we play the card too much, when people have understood that, well, the influencer is not really liking that product, she's getting paid to service that, we come back to the fundamental trust issue topics. This is one angle why, the traditional banks has a place that is really, really hard to replace. And basically also being on the cautious side all the way along, maybe is playing the longest card, the longest straw in the end, because the trust is there. I think another key topic that I saw from Vattenfall, you will have, it's this ecosystem thing for sure. But there is a very different thing to do a full service thing of anything, to be a full value chain utility, to be a full value chain bank. So you will be nibbled from all different kinds of corners, right? And the scary thing is if the nibbling is on all the margins, in the end you go bust because there's nothing left. But there is a service that, I don't really think Apple has any intention to be a full value chain bank. I don't see it, right? I see them coming in and very strategically eating in a very painful way, of course, but they will focus on what they're good at, or they will focus, like Tesla, they will focus on the total experience around the car and insurance, and we will have a different business model built around, I don't know. So I think being a bank from the core versus coming in the financial sector, everything, I think the easy bet is whoever is world class to work in a data and AI ecosystem has an opportunity. If you cannot compete if you cannot collaborate in ones and zeros in a data and AI ecosystem, I think you're dead. In the energy industry, in the transport industry, in the banking industry, water and...
So what are you saying about Nordea then?
I think it's up to them to win by becoming an ecosystem player and understand what that means, and shift their business model, their technology stack, their processes into, an architecture that is fitting this, and way of operating that is fitting this, collaborative culture that is fitting this. This is what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you on those things, and it's.
So you don't need to know exactly what position you're going to have, but the underlying mechanics. This is what you should work on.
Yeah, and
tips from the coach.
Yeah, and maybe the difference between a bank and maybe it's also for a utility company that you play actually a samhällsfunktion.
Yes.
So you're
this is important.
Which is important, right?
What is the English word for samhällsfunktion? It's utility. You are a utility in the society. Banking, a critical infrastructure part of society.
Yeah, and actually Nordea is also a global, systematic, important bank. So there's that comes with a lot of responsibility, and But I agree with the modular thinking, and that the idea of having a company structured around different customer segments probably won't make sense anymore, right?
The point is, how can you pick the right customer segments of tomorrow? Maybe you can't, right? Because someone will slice the dice from a Tesla car perspective, and then you have another target segment.
I think you would strip it down to like what's really customer critical, and then you have all the operations that supports that, and then you have these common functions. You know, there are only these three things that will matter. And I think that will affect a little bit how you organize. Because
how you organize people, how you organize processes, how you organize tech, how you organize data, right? I mean, like you following through on the logic all the way through. All right, so that I think we covered. That's a good summary and ending game on that. I want to talk. Do you have a topic? Do you want to go for? Otherwise, I have several.
You have a good question. Come on.
Yeah. Oh, do you have a topic? Actually, no. I want to go back to one of your topics, problem solving. What it was all about, process driven, because I think that goes back to we did that right now. But what was your thinking around problem solving being different?
Okay, I'll give you you like concrete stuff. So I'm going to give you a concrete example now how I came up with this. It was like apparent to me on using this new technology. We worked in Norway on this claims process. You know, like you work on Statoil and you're injured, and then you have this insurance, and you have you can claim that and get compensated. And the way you do that is that it's a very manual process combined with a lot of human judgment, and it takes quite a long time on average to solve these end to end, right? From the time you record your digitally your problem to when you get your money, and also when you do that, you're in a distressful situation maybe because something bad happened to you, So we looked at this process and we said, okay, how can we use robots, right, to improve this process? Like you usually talk when you talk about process, incrementally improving a process, which is the old way of solving problems. When I was in management consulting, that's how you solve it. As is to be, gap build it, and you get your 10%, maybe sometimes even 20%, sometimes even more, 25. Those are fantastic, right? So, but what we said, okay, 20. So if we do this with robots, then we can get this 10%, or maybe even 15. Great. But then we turn it on and said, okay, what would it take to make this process instant? Simple question, but it changes the whole sort of playing field how you solve that problem. So what would it take to make this outcome, this payment, instant? So the customer gets it the same day. So what do you need to do? Because then you can't incrementally improve that process. You cannot throw robots at it. You need to rethink, reimagine the whole thing. That is what problem solving is about. So the way this is 3-4 years back, but
maybe something related to first principle thinking.
Let him finish, because this is so close to the core what we've been preaching. But please, you go on and you pull the whole story out there.
Okay, so this takes 60 days, say, for average. I'm not something like that. 60 days from start to finish. So What do we need to make it instant? So then we say, okay, let's look at this when these come in. How can we categorize these to start with? The red, yellow, green thing, right? Simple. So we can build some business rules to say put some threshold to say this is, because we know 90% go through anyway. But let's put some thresholds and say this is a green case, clear case. Like when you apply for your mortgage loan, you want to top it with 10% because you do some renovation and you have only 40%, this is an easy thing, right? Okay, so green. So if you know it's green, then you can give it to a robot. The robot can go into the system, update the system, then it can hand it over to an algorithm that can check for financial fraud and flag it if it's something in the data that shows that this is potential fraud. And then if it's green, that can hand it over to another robot that can make the payment, go into the system and process the payment, right? There's no rocket science in that process. So that green flow then, that was run daily. So for those cases, we took it down from 60 to 1 day.
It sounds crazy, but quite simple when you break it down easily.
Yeah, and then there's a yellow case coming in. You say, we probably need to check, medical records, and we need to check with the what do you call it, the Försäkringskassan in Norway,
insurance,
social insurance. Blah, blah, blah. So then you go out and you ask for these medical records, right? That still takes 2 weeks. There's nothing you can do about that because the doctors need time, and then they send back a bunch of papers. Could be 3, could be 30 pages with the information about this particular customer. So if you are able to take that document, put it on a intelligent OCR, get into structured text, hand it over to a text analytics tool that just basically keyword search for dates, medication, symptoms, prior problems, and so on. You can actually train that to make a recommendation. Okay, not okay. Okay, you hand it over to the robot and you go the same process as the green one. Mm-hmm. So that process that you was taken down then from 60 days to 2 weeks because you cannot solve the analog
getting the reply from the doctor.
And then you have the red cases go straight to human. So so this is just a very simple example of how you apply some basic 4 or 5 different technologies. So categorization, robotics, pattern recognition, OCR, and text analytics to take an end-to-end process and make it instant. So that particular project was good because it taught us how to think about problem solving. Then of course, if you implement these solutions and if you build these point solution, it's difficult to scale, right? Because the scaling, but disregard the scaling. The way that problem was solved was like an aha thing. So I think that's what I mean with problem solving.
But let's dissect this because we have one part is the problem solving part. The other part I really like is, which we think we talked a lot about. You can actually go straight to AI from nowhere if you have a concrete enough problem and you can solve it, and you don't need this misconception that you need to have everything in order to do everything. So it's like what we would refine to as first principle approaches. Let's go back to that. But it's also an profound understanding of how first go use case, understanding the first principles, and then select the tech that works. Okay, putting on scaling is the next level on this. But I think we start sometime, as you said, with the tech and go around and try to find the problem. So let's dissect that. This problem solving topic, I think is fundamentally first principle we're discussing as a definition we've used. Have you heard first? I mean, like what you're talking about now is the difference between 10x and incremental, and the core word is reinventing. Have you heard about first principle thinking?
I heard it from your previous episodes, and but I didn't quite get it. So maybe you can take it again.
I think it's the same as you did now.
Okay.
I think this was an example of if we break something down to the core, and basically we say, well, or you've completely flipped the conversation, how could you do it differently? And now you came in from this, you put the metric on how do I do this instant? And when we have gone into this conversation, it's been a little bit like if you take an engineering problem, it's the same. Like, why is this taking 60 days? Let's flip it. Why does it need to take 60 days? It doesn't. And first principle is basically then stripping it down to the bare bones, and then from here, data and AI, whatever tech, building the components up in a different way. I mean, like, and I think this is the difference between true, automation and AI driven, when you haven't put, RPA on top of old systems. But if you truly strip it down to the bare bones, how would the process look like if you had all the data? If what is the real data you need? How can you automate this? Maybe, do you think this is? I think it's very close to problem-solving question when you put like a metric like this to first principle. How would you see it?
We have spoken about this so many times, but in short, I would say it's courage to break the norm, the courage to say even though we've done this process like this in 10 years, do we really need to do that? Can we think about a different way to do it? And can we rethink, what we're really trying to solve and perhaps solve it in a different way, like instant, claim processes?
So I think you had the courage to not being stuck in how a process was done, but to basically say, okay, we're going to go from 60 days. Come on, you can't go to 1 day. Let's start from the 1 day paradigm and build it up again. And you could clearly solve it for parts of the cases.
Now, when I talk about this, I usually draw like three circles. Like one circle is like ambition, as you say, be bold. One is, service design or start from, disregard what it looks like today, but start with a white paper basically, and then apply new technologies such as machine learning or APIs or blockchain, whatever, and then whatever you find in the intersection there, that's where the 10x is.
Yeah.
And that's also something they talk when I was in California, they all talk about these 3 horizons, right?
Yeah.
Horizon 1 is improve the current. Yeah. So horizon 2 is create a new with the new technology, and horizon 3 is basically disrupt the next. So I think for us as an incumbent company, moving from horizon 1 to horizon 2, which I think this claims case is something like horizon 2, that is there's a lot of value there. But it's about then being bold, as you said. It's about daring to take some bets and redistribute some of the funding that you applied to the horizon 1 into the horizon 2.
And here we come to the innovation rule, 10, 20, 70, or there is a rule of thumb how you should invest in the different horizons. I don't know if you have an opinion on that.
I mean, my opinion about innovation is that innovation is also a relative term, right? If you talk to Google X about innovation, to them, unless you fail 99 times out of 100, it's not really innovation. If you're certain from get-go about what you want to do, it's not really innovation. And to me, it's more like evolving or developing, to be honest. Yeah.
But I think one way of looking at first principles, because it's easy for us to say now, but let me take the example we are working on. How you make that into reality, that is exactly like you did. You put a conversation, you put a metric on it. So I work on the loan and leasing part of Scania right now, and we want to do credit automation, straight through processing, right? Real-time credit score, which is quite tricky, yeah? But it's quite doable if you start looking at sort of what's the parameters which is easy to score and what is more complicated. But you can't really start from the existing process, because the existing process is built on an analog process that was created for an analog purpose that had been computerized. So to do this well now and basically strip it down to the bare backbone is actually simpler than you think. It's the analog baggage that's the problem. And this, to go through this is a little bit like, I don't accept 2 weeks. This is real time. We need to be able to score this real now. How can you do that? I need that technology. I need that technology. I need that technology. I need this data. And it's quite doable. But to get here, Horizon 2 type innovation, it almost starts with someone putting this fundamental flipping the objective. That what you did. How can we make this instant? So this goal setting, I think, is quite a key here, how you define your metric.
Yeah, I think the metrics is super important, but I also think that obviously credit scoring is a tricky thing, because you also need to, there's a lot of stuff coming from like transparency and understanding what you're doing, not only understanding the underlying technology and the systems, but also understanding each decision in the context it was taken, because you might have to explain why. So I think to do that, you also need to have really good control mechanisms in place, so make sure that you don't violate your ethical or your norms or your business requirements or your compliance requirements and everything. So technically, yes, it's definitely doable, but it's
So what is the tricky point with recommender systems or decision engines in credit, as an example? Is the ethical part is clearly one part, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason why we don't see many examples of it yet in the marketplace, right? You see a lot of recommendation systems on the commercial side, because it's not so so heavily regulated, and it's not so sensitive. But when you come to claims handling, when you come to, I think there was a municipality of Trelleborg where they have this system, and they now get where they automatically approve customers, and they have now been, I think, filed by the local union, and I think a lot of all the banks, as I've seen it, no banks are doing this yet, the credit scoring, and it's just basically that you need to know what you're doing, I think. But there are some companies, some small companies that do it. There's one example from Norway, a really interesting company that do this. So they have 9 or 10 machine learning models that in a system, and they do instant credit scoring, and they have thousands of customers. So it's doable, yes, but it's like, not only do you have system legacy, but you also have like mindset or people legacy in how you think about things. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
And for a bank, especially, or other regulated companies that are coming from a truly policy-driven, rule-based way of working, you want to have people following procedure to say, now we want to be business-driven and data-driven. It's almost like the opposite.
Yeah.
So how can you be sure that you are following your policy when you all of a sudden have machine learning, which is, machine learning is like you have data and you have rules and you get an output. All of a sudden you have data and you have output and you get the rules. So how do you cope with that as a large bank or as a large corporate? I think that's the core of why this is difficult, and a mindset thing.
So the mindset is because ultimately your role as and how you need to think and act when you are augmented with AI shifts now, right? And then we get into the whole learning and change management topic then, I mean, like you can always make this into a segue around learning and So when we have mind shifts approaches like this, how do we cope with that? Because I think this is, in my opinion, one of the largest topics why it's not so easy for an analog company or a large enterprise, especially in the banking industry, to move so easily, because there are fundamental mind shifts that has clearly different aspects on it.
Yeah, I think to truly make a transformation, you probably need it has to come from the top and all the way down. And I like to when I think about these things, I like to look at companies who are AI first companies. Like there are a few AI first companies now.
Who would you look up to?
I mean, like Google is an example, but Microsoft I think is an interesting example. Like because they have transformed. There are only a few companies that were top 10 in the world 10 years ago. They are still on the list.
Yes,
and Microsoft is actually one of them. And I think so they have been able to transform their company from, as they say, from a bunch of know-it-alls to a bunch of learn-it-alls.
Yeah.
And I can if I go into the Microsoft AI landing page, I can see that. Because the first thing they go, so are you ready? If not, click here. And you go into all these, trainings and courses and, things you need to understand about how AI machine learning works and why that is different.
I think that's almost a new T-shirt. Go from know-it-alls to learn-it-alls.
Yeah,
I love that quote actually. That's awesome.
So dare to learn it all.
Yeah. So how do you? So that means that as leaders, you need to be vulnerable to some extent and ask questions. Start asking questions. How can this work? I don't. And to be open to learn how these new things can help, because obviously, even though going from policy driven to data driven is a very much shift, there's an obvious value in being data driven because everything becomes more personalized, more dynamic, more precise. So I think that they can probably intellectually understand that, but how do you get there? Because you need to let something go.
But and ultimately now it comes all the way down. Why this is learning is key here is because if you wanted, in order to work in a business ruled, policies driven job, you needed to know this. In order to function this and not work in the systems, but monitoring or working on the system or be part or being augmented, you kind of need to know a lot more and different things in order to understand how it works without doing it. So clearly here, over and over again, we will have a learning curve. And we can talk about this forever now. We can talk about lifelong learning and all that. But my question where I want to take this is, okay, this is a given. Learning is going to be critical to be successful, going from know-it-all to learn-it-all. And I can try to take responsibility for that as an individual. Okay, this is a mind, I want to learn. I go nuts, right? And it is helping my own and my career. But how do you design a learning organization, or what are the mechanisms that we need to work on now in the large enterprise to go from a know-it-all organization to a learn-it-all organization? How do you do that? What is your opinion?
Yeah, that's
a nice one, right?
That's a nice one. I mean, there are different ways. One way that we are addressing this is we think about challenger models, for example, right? You might build. If I would like to solve the credit problems, for example, I would team up with someone and create some challenger models and basically, preferably put it in production, but not use it, but let's see how it performs and compare it to what I have. And there also, because then you get the learning and you also see the performance and you build confidence and you build trust. And at some point, this challenger model which is probably the equivalent, 1% of the or 10% of the cost of this monster here will be performing better, be more lean and efficient and agile or whatever, and I trust it and I know how it works enough, and I will use it. So that, that could be one way of getting there, but because I don't think it's possible to just go from here and then shift and go here. You need to do some kind of, that's one example of what you could do.
But perhaps, if I can get one topic in, I know this is a favorite topic of yours, Henrik, so I do understand that you want to take and have a lot of discussions here, but just to segue from that, how do you actually move into a more innovative space? And you made a really, I think, interesting quote, which is kill the POC. And this also ties into the question, how do you really make innovation happen in a company? And you can think about different steps. I think you mentioned MVPs as well, that could be one way. But let's say that you now want to do the instant claim process, for example. What is the process to do that? You should kill the POC, you mean, even for that case?
You even had an article in Harvard Business Review, Kill the POC.
I was part of it.
Co-author.
Yeah.
In HBR.
Actually, my name wasn't there, but Nordea was mentioned. So it was me they interviewed. But it was I think that the heading was something like kill the POC. And I think that what I think about POCs, maybe POCs can be maybe defined in different ways.
Yeah. What's your definition?
So my definition is based from experience where it's used to prove some kind of value and get people on board. But usually you spend a lot of time on creating something that is quite far from being in production. So it's often a desktop product, could even be a PowerPoint, but it could also be some kind of script on a PC, I guess. But it is a nice demonstration, but all the effort that you put into it is quite often wasted, because a lot of the things you already know that it's kind of the thing to do, but how do you do it? And the how, you will not get the learning unless you take it all the way to production in some kind of shape or form.
But does that mean that you have to take everything to production to be able to do something?
Not everything, but a small, some kind of MVP. Because unless you take it from the source, do all the, and take it all the way through, testing, deployment, and see how it performs in production. Unless you do all that, it's difficult to really get the learning and really get the insights to really be able to see, is this feasible or not?
And just to clarify, because I think we all have different definition of what the POC means and prototype means and what the pilot means and what production means. But if I understand you correctly, what the going to production means, it means something that touch the real end user in some way. Or how would you define what going to production means? Yeah,
I think you're right. It goes into the end user, but it also sits in the environment somehow where you are planning to go. So it if you wanna take some kind of routing algorithm into customer service call center, right? And you want to be able to smartly route phone calls or predict do some forecasting on cases. Unless you take it all the way in the production and see how it fits and integrates with the environment that you are planning to put it in, you don't really know if it's going to work or not, and you don't get the learnings, and you don't get the because usually
let me try out then a ladder, so to speak, that we try to work with and see what you think about it, because there are problems with going to production in most companies. I would argue that going to production, even in a light way, like MVP style, is really hard,
damn difficult.
Yes. So then the question is, if the only thing you can do, even if it's an MVP, a small thing that may not be fully productionized, but at least it touched the end user in some way, takes 3, 4, 5 months to do. It will be really slow to do innovation. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. So let me follow up that. Just let me give a bit more longer context then. At least we try to have like 3 steps: actually having a POC, then a pilot, and then production. And what we basically mean with a POC is to be completely disconnected from the end user, disconnected from the organization. And in our case, it's just about using AI. So, I mean, it really means building some kind of model and seeing if we have the predictive power enough to actually see that we can use it for anything. But as long as you're disconnected from the real environment, it goes so much faster to iterate. But then you don't know the true value. So then you need to move to some kind of MVP or a pilot, as you can call it, where you're not fully productionized. You don't have continuous pipelines moving everything into the system as it should. And it's not having all the feedback loops and monitoring and alerting that you need to have. But at least it does move to the real end user. And you can do a proper evaluation as you can. And if that is successful, then you do the really big step, which I would argue is, it's even bigger. It's big to go from prototype to pilot, but to go to pilot from production is really big. Then it could be years of work.
No, and it might make more sense also for your company, because you are, for you, innovation is more at your core, or development is more at your core. Where as a bank, you need to spend a lot of time on run the business. So my problem then becomes if I for my innovation or development part spend a lot of time on stuff that will never reach production, never give us the learnings, then because when we come to say, we might do this, then it's probably more of a certain thing for us than it would be for you. So we want to do a voice bot. Do we need to prove the value? Do we need to prove the technology? Do we need to? No, I mean, it is something to do. So let's take something all the way in there and get the learnings and.
So you start from a point that already have some proven potential value at least.
I mean, most things, right? I find it hard to come up with something that is such an innovation that we don't know if it's gonna be valuable to us. I think most of the stuff we do are quite straightforward things.
Okay,
but
in that case, I can see it. Then it makes sense. But in a lot of cases, I would argue that unless you tried it on your own data, you don't know if it will have the predictive power and the value that you think it will have.
Yeah.
But I don't see that as a contradiction necessarily to.
I mean, then you can try it on the data without moving to the end user, I would argue.
Yeah, okay.
That's
sure.
But there are so many different dimensions on this, from idea to some sort of validation to development and all that. I mean, like there's the whole investment topic now. How can we fail fast and fail cheap? It's the whole dimension of to go to true adoption. Is a business dimension. Is the commercial dimension. Is a solution technology AI model dimension, and it's a data and underlying data compliance dimension. So if you take that thinking the long way, you come into idea to production use case life cycle where you clearly have an iterative approach. You can fail fast, but it puts a lot of thinking about what should we be doing in each phase. What is the key focus from a business perspective, solution perspective, and data perspective in the ideation phase? What is it actually that we're trying to do? And if we can get a whole organization to understand that lingo and that way of working, then you can have an industrialized approach on how do we do this faster. And I think the general understanding from everybody in innovation in Silicon Valley, I mean, like Lale, the real success comes down to how fast can you do one iteration cycle. Let's say it's the MVP. In Scania, we talk about evolutionary MVP. So we say MVP, and how do we address it the next level, the next level, the next level? And basically, lean startup, Eric Rice thinking, put on steroids. That's the real KPI. How fast can we, and what metrics do we use to understand where we're going? So I think this kill the POC is quite profound. If you see it this is the light that I was reading that story.
Yeah, and also you're onto something there that I've been thinking about. How efficiently can you kill the stuff that that doesn't make sense? How efficient can you be in killing those things so you can get to the stuff that will work? I think that maybe that's the core skill, rather than coming up with the.
Yeah, we have 99 ideas, and we through innovation we have 99 ideas and go for one. But do you know how do I kill those shitty ideas fast? The time is flying.
Wow.
Actually, I want to talk about new tech. I don't know, we're running over time. Mattias, are you in a hurry?
No, I'm not in a hurry. Go ahead.
As wrap-up topics, I would like to get a little bit outside, into fun. And, I think I know, I think you said somewhere, or I read somewhere, that you are quite passionate and interested in new tech and, and AI, So tell us a little bit about your passion, or is it professional? Is it private?
No, I think that my story usually when I talk about these things is I refer to this, the blue pill, red pill analogy, right?
Matrix.
So I love the Matrix, and you do too, I'm sure. Yes, at least the first one, right?
The first one is good.
The first one.
I think all is good.
Yeah. They're all good, but the first one is
But the first one is the
it was on telly the other day, by the way.
Was it? Yeah. Well, I've seen it like 35 times. But they talk about, because I think it's a little bit where I am in terms of, I took the red pill a few
years ago, and I'm down then in the rabbit hole, finding out how things will work, and I kind of want to see. We talked about what banking will look like. I kind of want to see the matrix. How will things play out? Like Neo in the end, he sees he sees the matrix, right? So that's how I think about it. But it's more to me than become a passion to see how these technologies that you guys, Beltarian or other, are working on out here, and how they can be sort of solving problems here on the side in the business, right? So connecting these things, that has become my passion, you could say. And then recently, then I've been, looking more in the AI space, like the AI solutions that are emerging, and the way people think about these things. So that is my passion, you could say. So that's why I follow all these great thinkers. Yeah, and so who's your favorites? So this is interesting. In order,
well, I really like to listen to the Exponential View is a great podcast, right? Seema Shah, and of course this AIAW is a great one.
That's a great one.
I heard about that.
No, but the people that talk about how we can solve things in a new way, and how they now I lost my line of thought here, but basically that's what I mean. And right now it's very much about. I happen to, as I'm a business person, I wish I was a data scientist or a technical person, but I'm not. So I'm more the bridge. But what I found is that it's a useful role, right?
Yes.
These translators.
Yes.
That I am kind of. It's like there's a clear space for a generalist, passionate guy in between the business problems and the technology. That's what I found, and that's why that's my mission. So I'm really more fond of. So I've chosen to see AI as a good thing. But I've also understand that it may not always be. But
do you believe in the singularity? Do you think that we will lose control of AI at some point soon?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. And the interesting thing there is, right, the greatest minds in the world are disagreeing on this topic, yes. Right? So it's almost like you intellectually, I don't know, but you have to take a stand. So I made a stand. I believe it in for the good. I believe that you need to develop, increasingly good AI to fight the bad AI. And the only way
That's
to,
a good
you
way.
know,
Yeah,
so I like to listen to, you know, Gary Kasparov, for example, like the old chess player, right? That he talks a lot about that, you know, that you know, the only way to beat the bad AI from Russia or China is to develop even better AI on our side. So that's one. He's also talking a lot about this human plus machine.
We can have another hour now used on philosophy.
Well, I'm eager to say, you know, I'm not sure if you saw it, like a week ago, it came a big article from, I think, NSF in US saying, we know Russia and China, as you said, is using AI to bad applications like warfare. It is going to be like an AI arms race in some way. So the question then, even though we never want to do that, we don't want to participate in using AI for an arms race, some people are going to do it. And what do you do? I hate to bring up this kind of negative topic in the end, but
no, but I think fight bad AI with good AI.
But it's hard.
But
right?
but actually, what could that be? I love that thinking. What could that be?
Bad AI.
No, fighting bad AI with good AI. I mean, like, we can understand AI for greed, AI for control. I don't know, but what's the good AI that can be even better? I mean, like, I think it has to be ethical and all that.
Yeah, I think that you probably are better equipped to answer that question. And I think it's not necessarily only to talk about good AI versus bad AI, but it's also to say that some AI shouldn't exist, right? I mean, like
for warfare.
Yeah, like Max Tegmark talking about, you need to ban AI for autonomous, weapons, right? It's just like you ban the chemical weapons. You need to just ban that, or so there's something that you don't go there.
Yeah, I like it.
And we have been successful in doing that for biological and chemical and nuclear weapons in the past.
So it should be the same logic. Why would that logic be different? I agree.
But then you can also take another angle and talk. I also like to listen to Stuart Russell. And he's talking a lot about why should we do AI? What should it be used for, and how to make sure it's human compatible? Right, his latest book. So I think that's also a way of thinking about. Also, I can take it to Nordea and say, just because we should do this, could do this. I mean, should we do it? I mean, why are we? What are we trying to accomplish? Because in the end, we wanted to make it better for us. So there's something there, not necessarily fighting good AI with bad AI with good AI, but applying, ways of thinking about how we apply it. That's also interesting, I think.
I mean, there's so many topics.
Yeah, there's so many topics.
It's like cybersecurity or whatnot.
Yeah,
they are trying to hack
systems. Area where you can definitely.
But I think
a good example of fighting.
I think
exactly. So
listeners,
you need to use both.
We're going into AI after work now. So, actually, AI after work. So I'm sorry. The real good stuff always starts 7:10. So we will.
But I wish cybersecurity for banks. That would be a topic that we should have moved into. But we don't have time right now.
Maybe I should do an event on it.
Let's do an event and have Mattias as the chairman. But actually, we are 10:00, so let's have the classical ending questions that we always do, and then we will have more beers if you want to. But what is next in your life? So what is sort of privately or professionally, things that you're excited about just now happening around the corner?
So I want to be part of making. This sounds very, pretentious or pretentious or whatever, but I want to be part of, creating, having AI for doing better, life better, AI for the greater good. So right now I'm doing it in Nordea, and I want us to push forward on our AI strategy and establishing the capability in the bank and do a lot of great stuff. We have a lot of great people. I was listening into this Swedish AI agenda kickoff the other week, right?
Awesome.
So I have been waiting for that for quite some time, and I'm a bit worried that we're not really I think that from a corporate or from a institutional perspective, we might be on the ball, but still, I think I'm missing the politicians really stepping into it and really sort of creating a clear direction for us. So that it would be nice and fun to work on that AI strategy also.
Are you moving in this direction to try to work with this? Or
I mean, I would be happy to if you know.
I will invite you to that.
I will invite you.
Yes.
I will. You put it up there. You will be invited to many things now.
So that's a few things that I'm.
But it's the whole AI agenda. You know, corporate to corporate ecosystem, society. You know. Academia, it needs to happen, right? In some ways, we need to sort of bring the different perspectives and brains together.
Yeah,
it sounds like that. That's what I took out of what you said. We need to move on it together. Cool. Final question: who would you like to see on this podcast?
Oh, that's right. I should have prepared that one. I knew that was coming. So I only mentioned a few, right? You should have Stuart Russell, Kasparov, Lex Friedman, Max Tegmark.
Kasparov, we are trying to get him on the podcast as a speaker. So let's see if we can get him.
Then you will come. Yeah.
Max Tegmark is a good idea.
Max Tegmark is a good idea.
He's. I liked on the Kasparov. I just like the thing that he's talking about. It's a machine, and human always beats the machine.
Augmented intelligence.
But
But who is your someone in the Nordics or in Sweden in Corona times?
Max Tegmark is one, of course.
Max, of course, is already mentioned.
Yeah, there's a lot of great people, of course. I interact a little bit with the guy Christian Gutmann. You know him?
Yeah.
He's a nice guy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. He's quite. We actually did one of these. What do you call them now? Clubhouse. Do you on Clubhouse?
Yeah, but I don't use iPhone, so
let's do a Clubhouse, Mattias. If you've done one with Christian, we should do a Clubhouse. Yeah.
Oh, but he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
And how did you find Clubhouse?
I was invited by someone. Yeah. That's how it works.
But you did a session, or you were?
Yeah, we had one session together. We just tried it out.
So is it?
It was us and two others.
Is it like Heta Linjen in its infancy?
Yeah, let's see where that goes. I don't know.
Cool. Mattias, fantastic. We have so much more to talk about, and I must give a personal. I don't know. You're talking in ways, and what you are experiencing is spot on in many ways. What I've seen, so it's super inspiring to listen to your thinking. Made me think in very similar. Thank you, Mattias.
Thanks for being here, for having me here.
Yeah,
it was great talking to you guys.
Cheers.